Okay, so second to last day. This was when we were driving from, it was about Twin Falls area up to Seattle. I drove part of the way, and Victor drove part of the way, and this was taken just over Snoqualmie Pass, I believe. There's a ski resort you can kind of see on the mountain there. So I chose this one for today, one, because we didn't really take that many photos that day, but also because it's a very layered photo. It's this foreground layer of trees, and then you have this mountain, then you have this mountain, then you have this mountain, and the clouds. So it's very sequential. It's a very deep photo. Even though it is taken, there's not a lot of big foreground, you can still see that depth to it. And I also like it shows the transition between this green forest and the mountains and the sky, and it's just a generally cool mountain photo, I think. So for taking it, ISO 160, 140 millimeters. So this was on a telephoto lens out of a car. So if you look down here, you can see a little bit of blurring. It's actually all over the photo, but mostly on this side. And that's because these foreground objects were moving faster than the background. So even though I was shooting at 1/800th of a second, which is really damn fast, this foreground was getting blurred a little bit because we were in a moving car. So it's especially important when you're in a moving car, any sort of movement, and you're shooting really telephoto, that you need to jack the shutter speed really, really high in order to get a sharp image. And that was partially why, I needed to use ISO 160 opposed to 100. And I was at 5.6. That was probably the minimum aperture that I can use 140 millimeters on that lens. So another way to avoid shake is to have a really fast lens, so you can open up, a lot of light. You can have a low ISO, and having that low ISO will help keep sharpness down, because artifacts introduced into the photo will decrease your sharpness. Anyway, so that's what it looked like before, which is kind of blue, kind of flat, not that great overall. But now, I think that looks so much better. So how did I get that? So essentially, I raised the contrast off, but I did it selectively. So I raised the highlights 37, so that's going to increase this area of the histogram, and then I increased the whites by 34, so that's just these portions. So I increased the overall contrast of the whites, or the overall brightness of the whites, a lot, and then I increased the actual highlights even more, so I get whiter whites, but then more of the tones are closer to white, if that makes sense. And then I did basically the same with black. I decreased the blacks, so the total blacks down here are going to be very black, but then I also darkened the shadows, so areas like these in the trees and up in here that were kind of gray are now much darker and closer to black. And that's further enhanced by doing clarity. So essentially what clarity does is increase the contrast between the shadows and the highlights, also the exposure. So it's like it takes this side and moves everything down, and it takes this side, moves everything down. So you have less of this middle gray, and you have more black and more highlights. More white, I should say. Well, they're not black and white, but it's that darker gray and lighter gray. Then I also increased the vibrance a bit. It just adds more color. Didn't do anything with the tone curve. Nothing with color. No split toning. No detail. I added a little bit of a vignette. I think that helps, especially on the corners. It makes that darkness in your eyes drawn mostly to light, so it draws your eye in towards that center of the image. Makes it look a little bit richer. And that's basically it.